It wasn't even 9 a.m. on a Monday, but my day, my life, effectively imploded somewhere between my second cup of coffee and reviewing quarterly depreciation schedules. I'm Mark Johnson, an accountant in Denver. My work is usually predictable, methodical. What happened next was anything but. A sudden sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen, so intense it made me cry out, then doubling over at my desk. A wave of nausea followed, and then a quick glance down confirmed the alarming greenish discharge I had noticed earlier that morning wasn't just my imagination. Something was seriously wrong. Shaking slightly, I buzzed my boss, telling him only that I had a sudden, severe medical issue and needed to leave immediately. He was understanding, thankfully, just told me to take care of myself and not worry about the spreadsheets. I grabbed my briefcase, mumbled something to the receptionist, and practically ran out the door, heading straight for the urgent care clinic a few blocks away. The clinic was efficient, impersonal. They took samples quickly, asked brief questions, and pointed me towards the waiting room. The 30 minutes I spent sitting there, surrounded by coughing patients and outdated magazines, felt like an eternity. Finally, a nurse called my name, her expression carefully neutral. Dr. Smith, an older man with tired eyes, didn't waste time on pleasantries after introducing himself. He opened my chart, looked at me directly, and said, "Mr. Johnson, your test came back positive for gonorrhea." The word hit me like a physical blow. Gonorrhea? But how? I stammered. That's an STD, right? Yes, it is, doctor. Smith confirmed, his tone professional but lacking judgment. It's sexually transmitted. He prescribed an antibiotic, advised avoiding sexual contact, and told me to follow up with my primary physician. He also mentioned standard procedure required notifying recent partners for testing and treatment. My mind reeled. Partners? There was only one. Doctor, I said, my voice tight, I need you to understand. I've been married for 15 years. I have never been with anyone but my wife, Jessica. Not once. Dr. Smith gave me a brief, sympathetic look. She could be asymptomatic, Mr. Johnson, or mistake symptoms for something else. It happens, but she absolutely needs to be tested and treated immediately to prevent serious complications. I left the clinic in a daze, clutching the prescription. The diagnosis wasn't just about a bacterial infection. It was an indictment of my entire marriage, my life with Jessica, our supposed partnership. Standing on the sidewalk, the Denver cityscape blurring around me, I made the only call I could. My parents. "Dad," I said, my voice cracking when he answered. "Mom? I just left urgent care. They said I have gonorrhea and SD." Silence hung heavy on the line for a beat. "And you know, I've only ever been with Jessica." "Oh, Mark?" Mom's voice was thick with shock and concern. "Son, are you okay? Where are you now?" Dad asked, his voice steady but grave. Their immediate belief in me, their unwavering support, was the only anchor in the sudden, violent storm that had just engulfed my world. The implication of how I contracted it hung unspoken between us, a devastating certainty. The diagnosis hung heavy in the air long after I left the clinic. Gonorrhea, from Jessica, my wife of 15 years. My mind struggled to reconcile the loving partner I thought I knew with this devastating medical fact. Following my parents' advice, I immediately scheduled an urgent consultation with Ms. Miller, a sharp, no-nonsense family law attorney they recommended. Sitting in her quiet, professional office the next day, I laid out the situation, the unexpected STD diagnosis, my absolute certainty that I hadn't strayed. Ms. Miller listened intently, her expression unreadable. "Okay, Mark," she said calmly when I finished. "This is obviously distressing. For divorce proceedings, especially regarding potential financial settlements, we need documentation. Can you gather your joint financial statements, tax returns for the past few years, both yours and Jessica's if you filed separately?" Back home that evening, numbly sorting through files in the study we shared, a stray piece of mail caught my eye. A sleek envelope from a high-yield investment bank I didn't recognize, addressed solely to Jessica. Curiosity overriding caution, I opened it. It wasn't junk mail. It was a quarterly statement for an investment account under her name only. An account I had no knowledge of. The balance listed at the bottom made my blood run cold for the second time in 24 hours. Just over $980,000. Nearly $1 million she had siphoned off and hidden away. When? How? Their separate tax filings suddenly made horrifying sense. It wasn't about saving a few bucks. It was about hiding massive bonuses and commissions. I immediately scanned the statement and emailed it to Ms. Miller. Her response was swift. "Mark, this changes the complexion significantly." She wrote back. "The STD suggests infidelity, but this level of financial secrecy points towards a long-term, calculated deception. I strongly recommend we engage a private investigator immediately." I agreed without hesitation. The investigator Ms. Miller hired was fast and efficient. Within 48 hours, she had a preliminary report back to my lawyer. Ms. Miller called me into her office. "Mark, brace yourself," she said gently, sliding a thin file across her desk. "The findings, well, they confirm your suspicions, and then some. The PI documented multiple meetings, different men, different locations, just within the past week. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills paid from accounts linked to Jessica but not your joint one, email confirmations." She paused, looking me directly in the eye. "There's also a brief audio snippet the investigator captured from a call Jessica made yesterday, presumably to her sister Rachel. I think you need to hear this part." She played the clip. Jessica's voice laced with impatience. "Honestly, Rachel, he's sweet, but so predictable, completely clueless. Another few years after Olivia's in college, and I'm gone. I've got everything lined up. He'll be fine. He's got his spreadsheets." Clueless. Spreadsheets. My world tilted again. This wasn't a recent lapse, it was a years-long strategy. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was a fundamental negation of our entire life together. That evening held the hardest conversation. I picked up Sophia, 15, and Olivia, 14, from school and took them straight to my parents' house. I needed their support, and the girls needed distance from the storm about to break. Sitting them down in my childhood living room felt surreal. I explained as gently as I could that Mom had been unwell, that I had gotten sick because of it, and that Mom hadn't been honest with me, that a divorce was now unavoidable. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. Sophia, always the more observant one, just nodded slowly. "We kind of figured something was wrong, Dad," she admitted quietly. "Mom's been acting weird for ages, always on her phone, whispering, taking work calls outside, locking her laptop. She barely talks to us anymore," Olivia added, sniffling. "It's like she wishes we weren't around." Their words, confirming my own ignored observations, were both heartbreaking and validating. "Are you okay, Dad?" Sophia asked, her hand finding mine. "I will be," I promised, forcing a smile. "And no matter what, you two are my priority." Their immediate, unwavering loyalty was a lifeline. In that moment, I also made the decision to get the paternity test Ms. Miller had suggested. Amidst all this deceit, I needed that one biological certainty. The results would take time, but the samples were collected the next day. The ground beneath my feet was crumbling, but I knew, looking at my daughters, I had to stay standing. The week following the conversation with my daughters was a blur of muted anger and methodical planning with Ms. Miller. The paternity test results came back. Sophia and Olivia were mine, a small island of certainty in an ocean of deceit. Ms. Miller was drafting the initial divorce filings, incorporating the evidence of infidelity and the hidden finances. I functioned on autopilot, going through the motions at work, plastering on a neutral expression at home in the evenings until Jessica left for her increasingly frequent late showings or networking events. The confrontation I knew was coming felt inevitable, but I hadn't decided how or when to initiate it. Then fate intervened in the most brutal way possible. The call came late Wednesday night, an unfamiliar number flashing on my screen. It was Denver General Hospital. "Mr. Mark Johnson?" a calm female voice asked. "I'm calling about your wife, Jessica Johnson. There's been an accident." My blood ran cold. Again. What kind of accident? Is she okay? "She was involved in a serious multi-car collision on Alzheimer's 25, sir," the voice explained gently. "A distracted driver caused a pileup. She's been brought to the ICU. She's in critical condition, and the doctors have placed her in a medically induced coma to manage swelling and aid healing." Critical condition. Coma. The words barely registered. Despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the STD, a jolt of pure shock and a strange vestigial concern shot through me. "I'll be right there," I managed, grabbing my keys. At the hospital, the air thick with antiseptic and anxiety, I met with Dr. Blake, the attending physician. He confirmed the severity of her injuries, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, a significant head trauma requiring the coma. "It's too early to give a definitive prognosis, Mr. Johnson," he said gravely. "We're monitoring her closely." He also, thankfully, informed me that the initial rapid HIV test they ran as a precaution came back negative, though this gonorrhea diagnosis obviously stood. It was a small relief in a sea of terrible news. He allowed me into her ICU room. Seeing Jessica lying there, hooked up to a symphony of beeping machines, tubes running in and out, her face bruised and swollen beneath the bandages. It was jarring. This was the woman I had loved, the mother of my children, now utterly vulnerable, her hidden life momentarily paused by violence and chance. The anger I'd been nursing warred with a confusing wave of pity and a profound sense of waste. All the lies, the secret planning, the stolen moments. For what? For this? But the pity couldn't erase the facts. It couldn't undo the betrayal that had permeated every aspect of our lives. Standing there beside her still form, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about truth. It was about closure on my terms. From the briefcase I'd brought containing copies of documents from Ms. Miller, I pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside wasn't every piece of evidence, but a concise summary prepared by the lawyer. Copies of the key hotel receipts, printouts of the most damning email exchanges the PI had recovered, and a transcript of that chilling audio snippet where Jessica dismissed me and detailed her exit plan. I took off my simple gold wedding band. My fingers trembled slightly as I dropped it into the envelope with the papers. I sealed it, wrote Jessica clearly on the front. I approached the nurse quietly monitoring the machines. "Excuse me," I whispered. "Could you please make sure my wife receives this envelope personally when she wakes up? It's important." The nurse nodded sympathetically. "Of course, sir. You can leave it right here on her bedside table. She'll see it first thing." "Thank you." I placed the envelope where Jessica couldn't miss it. Then gently, carefully, I slipped the diamond engagement ring and wedding band off her still finger. They felt heavy, cold in my palm. I pocketed them. "Goodbye, Jessica," I murmured, the words catching in my throat. I looked at her one last time, a ghost of the woman I thought I married. Then, with a nod to the nurse, I walked out of the room and didn't look back. Driving away from the hospital, the weight on my chest felt different. Not lighter exactly, but shifted. The anger was still there, but now fused with a grim sense of finality. I made one more call, this time to Rachel, Jessica's sister. I explained the accident, the coma, and, briefly, my decision to proceed with the divorce, mentioning the evidence I'd left. Rachel was shocked, quiet for a long moment. I suspected Jessica might have been restless, she finally admitted, confirming fragments of what the PI's audio had suggested about her past. But this... and the STD you mentioned earlier. God, Mark, I'm so sorry. Her support, however, was clearly limited. She expressed concern, but made it clear she couldn't offer Jessica a place to stay, given the circumstances and her own family obligations. Jessica was truly on her own, knowing Jessica would eventually need a place to go upon discharge, and acting on Ms. Miller's earlier advice about securing separate residences. I spent the next morning making arrangements, using funds from our joint savings account, money I was legally entitled to access pre-divorce. I secured a lease on a small, accessible ground-floor apartment for Jessica, and paid the deposit plus first 2 months' rent. It was a practical necessity, devoid of emotion. My focus now was solely on my daughters and navigating the path ahead. The confrontation was done, delivered in silence. Now I just had to wait for her to wake up and read it. The following weeks were a strange limbo. I focused on work, on maintaining stability for Sophia and Olivia, who were still staying with my parents, and on my own follow-up doctor visits, which confirmed the gonorrhea was cleared and I was negative for everything else. Ms. Miller kept me updated on the legal front. The divorce petition was drafted, ready to file. We were just waiting for news from the hospital. It came nearly 3 weeks after the accident. A nurse called to inform me Jessica was awake, extubated, and though still weak and facing a long recovery, she was lucid. The medically induced coma had done its job. Within hours, Ms. Miller had arranged for a process server to formally deliver the divorce papers to Jessica's hospital room. I waited another day, giving her time to absorb the documents before visiting myself. Walking into that hospital room again felt different. The urgent crisis atmosphere was gone, replaced by the quiet routine of recovery. Jessica lay propped up slightly, bandages still prominent, her face pale and thinner, but her eyes were open, alert, and filled with a mixture of pain, anger, and disbelief as she saw me enter. The sealed envelope I had left rested on her bedside table, clearly open now, its contents likely absorbed. "Divorce papers, Mark," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Really? You couldn't even wait until I was out of this bed?" I stood near the foot of the bed, keeping a deliberate distance. "The waiting ended 3 weeks ago, Jessica," I replied calmly, my voice devoid of the rage I still felt simmering beneath the surface. "It ended the moment I got the diagnosis you gave me. Everything else I discovered just confirmed the decision." I nodded towards the envelope. "I assume you read the summary?" Her eyes flickered towards it, then back to me, shame warring with defiance. It wasn't like that." "Wasn't it?" I cut her off, keeping my tone level. "Multiple men, Jessica. Hotel receipts, emails, an investment account with nearly $1 million you never told me about, and the audio, the plan to leave me once the girls were gone, dismissing 19 years like it was a temporary inconvenience." I let the questions hang there unanswered. She started to cry then, silent tears tracking down her bruised cheeks. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I messed up. I never meant—" "Save the apologies, Jessica," I said, feeling weary rather than vindictive. "They don't change the facts. This wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated long-term deception." I took a breath, ready to lay out the consequences she had clearly never anticipated. "First, the girls. I'm filing for sole physical custody. They know enough about the situation, and frankly, right now, they don't want to live with you. The paternity test confirmed their mind, by the way." Her eyes widened slightly at that, another detail she likely never considered I'd check. "I'll agree to supervised visitation down the road, if they choose it, but the days of you undermining our family are over." Her sobbing intensified, but I continued. "Second, the house. You won't be coming back there. I've already secured a 2-bedroom accessible apartment for you near Rachel's neighborhood. The deposit and first 2 months' rent are paid, from the joint account before you ask. Rachel has the keys and has reluctantly agreed to help coordinate moving your belongings there when you're discharged." "Rachel?" Jessica choked out. "Yes, I spoke with her. She knows. And while she offered limited help with the move, she made her position quite clear regarding ongoing support. You burned that bridge too, Jessica. Finally, the finances. Ms. Miller has already put a legal hold on that secret investment account you built. All marital assets, including that one, will be divided according to state law as part of the divorce settlement. You played a long game hiding that money, but the game is up." She stared at me, speechless, the fight seemingly draining out of her. The confident, successful facade she wore for the world had crumbled, leaving behind someone lost and facing the wreckage she alone had created. I didn't want this," she finally whispered. "I do love you, Mark. In my own way." "Your way wasn't enough, Jessica," I replied quietly. "It wasn't real." I paused, looking at the woman who was now essentially a stranger. "Maybe someday you'll understand the depth of what you threw away. Maybe someday forgiveness will be possible, but trust? Us? That's gone forever." I turned to leave. "Get well, Jessica. For Sophia and Olivia's sake, I hope you recover fully." "Mark, wait!" Her voice was desperate. I paused at the door but didn't turn back. "Goodbye, Jessica." I walked out into the sterile hospital corridor, leaving her alone with the divorce papers, the evidence of her betrayal, and the undeniable consequences of her choices. The confrontation was over. A painful chapter was finally closed. The divorce finalized surprisingly smoothly about 3 months after Jessica's discharge from the hospital and subsequent move into the apartment I'd arranged. Ms. Miller had been thorough. Faced with the undeniable evidence and the frozen account, Jessica signed without much fuss. My share of the marital assets, including a significant portion of that secret fund she'd amassed, went straight into secure college funds for Sophia and Olivia. Their future was my priority. My own health checks came back completely clear. The gonorrhea was long gone, and thankfully, no other issues had surfaced. Life settled into a new rhythm. Being a single father to 2 teenage girls wasn't easy, navigating homework, heartbreaks, and driving permits on my own, but Sophia and Olivia were incredible. We became a tighter unit, leaning on each other, rediscovering our family dynamic without the shadow of their mother's deceit hanging over us. My parents, Robert and Mary, were rocks, offering unwavering support and frequent home-cooked meals. The following year brought more healing. The girls, now 16 and 15, began having occasional cautious contact with Jessica. From what they shared, she'd faced professional repercussions from her and her behavior getting out, but was working at a different firm, and slowly rebuilding her life separately. They kept the visits brief, their loyalty clearly remaining with me, but I encouraged them to maintain whatever connection had felt right for them. It was actually Sophia who brought it up first one evening. "Dad," she said, looking up from her homework, "don't you think maybe you should, I don't know, go out sometime?" Olivia chimed in immediately. "Yeah, Dad. It's not healthy to just work and hang out with us all the time. You need adult conversation." I laughed, surprised. "I talk to adults at work, and I have you two keeping me busy." "We won't be around forever," Olivia said pragmatically. "You need to practice talking to a woman again." Their teasing held a genuine note of concern, and maybe they were right. The gaping wound left by Jessica's betrayal had scarred over, leaving a dull ache but no longer consuming me. Perhaps it was time. A few weeks later, volunteering at a Saturday community cleanup event near our Denver neighborhood, I struck up a conversation with another parent volunteer, Sarah Williams. Her son was a grade below Olivia. She was divorced, funny, down to earth, and easy to talk to. We chatted about navigating teenagers, juggling work, the ridiculous price of Denver real estate. For the first time in what felt like forever, I talked to a woman without feeling guarded or cynical. As the event wrapped up, I took a chance. "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to sound casual. "I know this is out of the blue, but would you maybe like to grab coffee sometime next week?" She smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that, Mark. I really would." Our first coffee date a few days later was nice, simple, easy, blessedly normal. We talked for over an hour, no drama, no pretense. As we parted ways, she said, "We should do this again." "Definitely," I agreed, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, cautious optimism. The future was still uncertain, the path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but standing here, finally free from the wreckage of the past, it felt for the first time truly full of possibility.